The Galactic Grand Arena was alive with sound. Thousands of alien spectators filled the massive stadium, their voices merging into a deafening roar. Giant holographic screens hovered in the air, displaying past champions, brutal fights, and warriors who had met their end in the pit below. The arena floor was a battlefield of blood and honor, where the strongest fighters from across the galaxy clashed for glory. Only the most powerful warriors survived. The weak, they were crushed, forgotten, erased from history. Tonight was special. The championship match was about to begin. The reigning champion, a 10-foot-tall, four-armed warlord named Korgath the Destroyer, stood in the center of the arena. His black armor gleamed under the bright stadium lights. His four fists clenched, ready to tear apart whatever fool dared to challenge him. A reptilian announcer, floating above the battlefield on a hovering platform, raised his microphone. His sharp teeth flashed in a cruel grin. And now, our next challenger. His voice echoed through the arena. From a forgotten world, a species no one respects, a human. The crowd went silent. For the first time in years, the Galactic Grand Arena fell completely still. No cheers, no roars, only the quiet hum of the energy barriers surrounding the battlefield. A single metal door at the far end of the arena hissed open. From the dark tunnel, a lone figure stepped forward, a human. He was tall by human standards, but compared to the alien titans around him, he looked small, fragile, weak. He wore a simple black combat suit, lacking the heavy armor or advanced weaponry of the other fighters. His brown hair was slightly messy, his expression calm and unreadable. Commander Jack Carter. He walked forward with steady steps, eyes scanning the battlefield. His face showed no fear. The crowd stared, waiting for him to break down in terror. He didn't. Instead, he stopped in the center of the arena and looked up at the monstrous Korgath. The warlord towered over him like a living mountain, his muscles bulging, his forearms twitching in anticipation. Korgath's deep, rumbling voice filled the arena. "Is this a joke?" His yellow eyes glowed with amusement. Jack didn't respond. The announcer laughed. "A human? This will be over in seconds." The audience erupted into mocking laughter. Some aliens booed, others shouted insults in different languages. A few threw objects toward the battlefield, though the energy barrier disintegrated them mid-air. Jack ignored it all. His focus was on Korgath. The warlord cracked his knuckles, then reached over his back and pulled out a massive spiked club, a weapon that could crush steel with a single swing. He grinned, revealing sharp teeth. "Let's see how fast I can break you, little human." The announcer raised his hand. "Begin." Korgath charged. The ground shook beneath his enormous footsteps. His club swung downward, aiming straight for Jack's skull. Jack didn't move. The audience gasped. Then, just as the club was about to connect, Jack vanished. A blur. A flash of movement so fast that most of the crowd couldn't even follow it. The next thing they saw, Korgath's attack had missed. Jack was already behind him, unharmed. The warlord blinked, confused. He had fought countless battles, crushed hundreds of warriors, yet he hadn't even seen Jack move. The silence in the arena deepened. Jack slowly turned his head toward Korgath. His voice was calm, almost lazy. Too slow. The crowd exploded, shocked gasps, confused shouting. No one had expected this. Korgath snarled, gripping his club tighter. His pride as a champion burned. This human was mocking him. No one mocked him and lived. With a furious roar, he spun around and swung the club again, this time with all four arms, doubling its speed. The force alone created a shockwave, sending dust and debris flying in all directions. Jack still didn't move. The club raced toward him like a comet. And just before impact, the screen cuts to black. The audience holds its breath. The screen fades in from black. The Galactic Grand Arena is still silent. Thousands of eyes stare at the battlefield, waiting for the dust to clear. The massive warlord Korgath the Destroyer stands in the center, gripping his enormous club. His forearms are tense, his muscles straining. And yet, something is wrong. His weapon has not hit its target. Korgath's yellow eyes scan the ground where his club should have crushed the human challenger. But the human is not there. A flicker of movement behind him. He barely turns his head in time. Jack Carter stands just a few feet away, unharmed, calm, waiting. Korgath snarls in disbelief. His club, powerful enough to shatter reinforced battle armor, had swung through nothing but air. How? The warlord's confusion quickly turns to rage. He lunges at Jack, swinging again, faster this time. His movements shake the ground. The air around them hums with energy. The crowd holds its breath. Jack sidesteps effortlessly. Another attack, dodged. Another, missed. Korgath roars in frustration, his attacks becoming wilder, more desperate. He is a warrior, a champion, a living legend, and yet he cannot touch this one small human. Then for the first time since the match began, Jack moves to attack. His body is a blur. In less than a second, he closes the distance between them. Before Korgath can react, Jack's fist connects with his jaw. A loud, sickening crack echoes through the arena. The warlord's head snaps back. His massive body stumbles. The crowd gasps in shock. A champion, staggered by a single punch. A few hours earlier, the story rewinds to show a different setting. A cold, metallic hallway. The fighter preparation chambers beneath the arena. Jack Carter sits alone on a bench, his eyes closed. His breathing is slow, steady. Around him, alien warriors prepare for battle. Some sharpening blades, others adjusting advanced cybernetic armor. Laughter echoes through the room. Several fighters, some twice his size, glance at him and smirk. One, a hulking insectoid creature with 4 glowing red eyes, leans closer. A human? Here? This must be a mistake. Another alien, a scaled, lizard-like warrior, chuckles. Weak species. They don't even fight in the wars anymore. Their homeworld is, what was it called? Oh, right, gun. Jack doesn't react. They don't understand. They never will. He remembers Earth. The planet had been destroyed decades ago, lost in a war humanity never saw coming. The survivors had scattered across the galaxy, living as refugees, mercenaries, traders. To most alien species, humans were a forgotten race, broken and weak. But Jack knew the truth. Humans weren't weak. They had simply never been given a fair fight. Tonight, that would change. Back in the arena, Korgath growls, shaking off the pain. He lifts his club again, ready to crush the human once and for all. But then, he hesitates. Something is wrong. Jack isn't breathing heavily. He isn't sweating. He doesn't even look tired. The human stares at him with calm, calculating eyes, like a predator. The champion of the arena has never felt fear before. But now, for the first time, he wonders, did I just make a mistake? The Galactic Arena was not silent anymore. Thousands of voices clashed together, shouting in disbelief, roaring in confusion. Some cheered, others screamed in anger. The mighty Korgath the Destroyer, champion of the arena, undefeated warlord, had just staggered back from a single punch. A punch from a human. Korgath clenched his jaw. His entire body burned with rage. He was not just a warrior. He was a legend, a conqueror, the destroyer of empires. And now, in front of the entire galaxy, he had been humiliated. His glowing yellow eyes locked onto Jack Carter, the human who stood before him. Calm, still, waiting. Jack didn't look like a warrior. He wore no armor. He carried no weapon. And yet, Korgath could feel it now, the presence of a predator. The crowd continued to scream, but Korgath heard nothing. His blood boiled. His 4 massive fists clenched. This would end now. With a deafening roar, he activated his cybernetic implants. His muscles bulged, his skin hardened, and his speed doubled. Electricity crackled over his body as he pushed his enhancements to their absolute limit. "You die here, human," Korgath bellowed. Then he charged. The ground trembled beneath his steps. His club swung forward, slicing through the air faster than before. This time, Jack didn't dodge. He moved forward. The audience gasped. In less than a heartbeat, Jack closed the distance between them. Korgath's club was still mid-swing, but the human was already inside his guard. Then, Jack's fist shot forward. It was a simple punch, no special technique, no unnecessary movement, just a perfect, precise strike aimed at one spot, Korgath's throat. The moment the punch landed, Korgath's eyes widened in shock. His body froze. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the warlord's knees buckled. His 4 massive arms went limp. His club fell from his hands, crashing to the ground with a loud clang. Korgath tried to breathe, but no air came. His throat had collapsed. He fell forward onto his knees. The mighty champion of the arena was dying. The entire stadium fell into stunned silence. Jack Carter stood before his fallen enemy, watching him struggle. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no satisfaction, just calm certainty. Korgath's body shook as he gasped for air. His massive frame swayed, then, with a final exhale, he collapsed. Dead. The Galactic Grand Arena exploded. Some aliens screamed in shock. Others cheered, thrilled by the unexpected result. Many simply couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. A human had won. The announcer, who had been silent for the longest time, finally spoke, his voice shaking. The human wins. Jack Carter turned away from the body and walked toward the exit. He didn't raise his fists in victory. He didn't celebrate. He had proven his point. But this fight was only the beginning. The Galactic Grand Arena had never been this chaotic. Moments ago, Korgath the Destroyer, the undefeated champion, had fallen, dead, and his killer, a human. Jack Carter walked toward the exit, his steps slow and steady. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't look back. He had won, and that was enough. But the galaxy wasn't ready to accept it. The silence that had lasted for only a moment was now replaced by a storm of voices. "Impossible," shouted one alien in the crowd. "The human cheated," another roared. "No one beats Korgath." The announcer, still hovering above, looked nervous. This had never happened before. No one had expected Korgath to lose, especially not to a species considered weak and forgotten. But rules were rules. The announcer took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. "The victor is the human Jack Carter." Boos, shouts, a few cheers. The arena was divided. Jack ignored it all. He just wanted to leave. Then, the doors to the arena suddenly slammed shut. Jack stopped. The crowd hushed. A deep, cold voice echoed through the stadium. "No." A new figure stepped onto the battlefield. The crowd gasped. Some warriors in the audience even stepped back in fear. Jack turned to look. At the far end of the arena stood a tall, dark figure clad in black armor. His helmet covered his face, revealing only two glowing red eyes. On his back, a massive energy blade hummed with power. The announcer's voice trembled as he spoke. "Dreadlord Voka." The reaction from the audience said it all. Fear. Jack studied the new warrior. Voka was different. He didn't look angry like Korgath. He didn't roar or shout. He simply watched Jack like a predator analyzing its prey. Voka spoke again, his voice calm but filled with menace. "Korgath was a fool. Strength without control is nothing. But you," he tilted his head slightly, "you are different." Jack said nothing. Voka took another step forward. "I will fight you next, human." And unlike him, he glanced at Korgath's lifeless body. "I will not underestimate you." The crowd exploded with excitement. A new challenger, a warrior even stronger than Korgath. Jack exhaled slowly. He had just finished a fight, and now he was expected to battle again. He looked up at Voka's glowing red eyes. Jack's lips curled slightly into the faintest hint of a smile. "Fine," he said. "Let's see what you've got." The crowd roared. The announcer's voice echoed across the arena. Let the battle begin. The Galactic Grand Arena had never been this loud. Thousands of alien spectators roared with excitement, their voices shaking the stadium. The news had already spread beyond the arena, across entire star systems. A human had defeated Korgath the Destroyer, and now he would face an even greater threat, Dreadlord Voka. Jack Carter stood in the center of the battlefield, staring at his new opponent. The towering warrior in black armor barely moved. His red eyes glowed like burning embers, locked onto Jack with an unnatural stillness. The announcer floated above, voice trembling. "Let the battle begin." A loud gong rang through the air, but this time, Jack didn't move. Neither did Voka. The two warriors simply stood there, staring at each other. The crowd, expecting an explosive clash, began to murmur in confusion. Then, Voka spoke. "I watched your fight with Korgath." His voice was calm, almost emotionless. "You rely on speed, precision. You wait for your enemy to make mistakes." Jack said nothing. He only watched, waiting. Voka took a slow step forward. "I will not make those mistakes." Then he vanished. Jack's eyes widened. No movement, no sound. Voka had disappeared. The next second, a sharp pain exploded in Jack's side. His body was suddenly thrown backward, skidding across the arena floor. The crowd gasped. Jack groaned, forcing himself up. What just happened? Voka still stood in the same place as before. He hadn't moved. But Jack had felt the hit. Hard, precise, Too fast to see. Voka tilted his head. You are fast, human, but I am faster. Jack exhaled slowly. A trick. Voka was using something unseen. Maybe an advanced teleportation system. Maybe an energy-based attack. Jack had to figure it out. Fast. Voka took another step forward. Jack's muscles tensed. This time, he was ready. Then, Voka vanished again. Jack didn't wait. Instead of reacting, he moved first. He ducked, just as something invisible sliced through the air above him. A flicker, a distortion. Jack saw it now. It wasn't teleportation. It was speed beyond normal sight. Voka wasn't vanishing. He was moving too fast for the eye to track. Jack's lips curled into a slight smirk. Got you. The next attack came, a blur of motion. But this time, Jack's body moved before his mind even processed it. His fist lashed out, straight into the air. For a split second, there was nothing. Then, his fist connected. A loud, sickening crack. The air in front of him shimmered, and suddenly, Voka appeared, his massive body staggering back. The crowd froze in shock. Jack Carter had just done the impossible. He had hit the unseen. Voka steadied himself, his red eyes narrowing. For the first time, he looked angry. Jack rolled his shoulders, shaking off the pain in his ribs. Not so fast now, are you? The crowd erupted. The Galactic Grand Arena trembled with excitement. The battle between Jack Carter and dreaded Voka had become something no one expected. Korgath the Destroyer had fallen, but Voka was supposed to be different. Stronger, smarter, faster. And yet, Jack had just hit him. The entire stadium had seen it. The unseen warrior, the undefeated champion, the terror of 1,000 battlefields, had been struck. Jack stood tall, rolling his shoulders as if knocking down galactic warlords was just another day's work. His ribs hurt from the earlier attack, but he ignored the pain. Voka, on the other hand, was motionless. For a long, tense moment, the armored warrior stared at Jack. His glowing red eyes, once calm and calculating, now burned with something new. Rage. Then, without a word, Voka slowly reached up and removed his helmet. The crowd gasped. Jack's expression remained neutral, but even he was surprised. Beneath the helmet was a scarred, inhuman face. Pale gray skin, sharp features, and strange black markings running down his jawline. His red eyes were no longer hidden behind a visor. They were real. You? Voka's voice was deeper now, no longer filtered through his armor. You are the first. Jack tilted his head. First what? Voka's fingers clenched into fists. The first to land a strike. The first to make me bleed. Jack glanced at his opponent's cheek. A thin, nearly invisible crack had formed in the black markings. Not much, but enough. Enough to show that Voka was not invincible. The crowd didn't know how to react. Some cheered, some whispered in fear, others simply stared in silence. Then, Voka smiled. A slow, unsettling grin. Good. Jack's body tensed. He had seen smiles like that before. They only meant one thing. The real fight was about to begin. The arena darkens. Without warning, the arena lights flickered. A deep, mechanical hum filled the air. The energy field surrounding the battlefield shifted, its color turning from bright blue to a pulsing, dark red. The announcer, hovering above, looked nervous. The champion has activated. Limit mode. The crowd exploded in excitement. Jack narrowed his eyes. Limit mode. Before he could react, the ground shook beneath him. Voka's body began to change. His veins glowed with an eerie crimson light. His muscles pulsed unnaturally, shifting and expanding. His fingers curled into razor-sharp claws. His red eyes became brighter. Jack took a slow breath. Great, just what I needed. Voka moved. Not ran, not lunged, just moved. And yet, he was already in front of Jack. Jack barely had time to react. He threw himself backward, just as a deadly claw sliced through the air where his head had been a millisecond ago. Too fast. Jack skidded to a stop, sweat forming on his brow. Voka wasn't just stronger. He wasn't just faster. He had evolved. Jack clenched his fists. This fight was no longer about endurance, no longer about dodging. If he wanted to survive, he had to end it. And he had to do it now. The Galactic Grand Arena had never witnessed a fight like this. The moment Dreadlord Voka activated limit mode, the battlefield changed. The very air felt heavier. The red glow pulsing from his body was unnatural, almost alien. Jack Carter had fought monsters before. He had survived impossible odds. But this was different. Voka wasn't just stronger, he was beyond human limits. Jack exhaled, forcing his body to stay loose. He could feel the tension in his muscles, the exhaustion creeping in. One mistake, and it was over. Voka stood perfectly still, his claws twitching, red eyes locked onto Jack like a predator studying its prey. Then he moved. Jack barely saw it. 1 second, Voka was in front of him. The next, a blur of motion. Jack twisted, dodging left, but not fast enough. A sharp pain exploded across his side as Voka's claw ripped through his shirt, leaving a deep gash along his ribs. Jack gritted his teeth, stumbling back, too fast. Voka didn't stop. The warrior lunged again, his fist a blur of motion. Jack barely had time to raise his arms before, bam! A devastating blow slammed into Jack's chest, sending him flying across the arena. He hit the ground hard, rolling several times before coming to a stop. The crowd roared. Some cheered, others screamed, but Jack could barely hear them. His entire body ached. His vision swam. But he was still conscious, still alive. Voka approached, slow and steady. "You fought well, human," he said, "but this is the end." Jack wiped blood from his mouth. His body screamed for rest, but he ignored it. He had one last chance. Voka raised his claws for the final strike. Jack moved, not backward, forward. Voka's red eyes widened in surprise. Jack rushed toward him, closing the gap before he could react. Then, Jack's fist shot forward. A single punch, not aimed at Voka's chest, not at his head, but at the small crack on his face, the one Jack had made earlier. The moment Jack's fist connected, the crack shattered. Voka's body froze. A split second later, his entire form spasmed. The red glow flickered, his energy field collapsed, and his claws retracted. Voka stumbled back, eyes filled with shock. His power was gone. Jack took a slow breath. "You're tough." He clenched his fists. "But you're not unbreakable." Voka tried to move, but Jack was faster now. Jack stepped forward, pivoted on his heel, and unleashed a final, devastating punch straight into Voka's chest. Boom! Voka's armored body lifted off the ground and flew backward, crashing into the far end of the arena with a deafening impact. Silence. Then the announcer's voice echoed through the stadium. "Dreadlord Voka has fallen." The crowd erupted. Some were in shock, others were in pure awe. Jack Carter had done the impossible. He had beaten not one, but two of the strongest warriors in the Galactic Arena. Jack exhaled, stepping back. His body ached. He was exhausted. But he had won. For now. As the medics rushed onto the battlefield, as the entire galaxy began to whisper his name, Jack couldn't help but wonder, who would come for him next?